like applique, if you love having fun with your projects, and if you like an element of surprise and mystery with your quilts, then you're going to love the series that we are starting today. Hello, my name is Lisa. I'm with Lisa Capen Quilts, and today starts our first video for the new mystery quilt called Happiness is Homemade. So, just like I mentioned, this is going to be an applique quilt. We're going to do an 8-week series, and every Friday morning there will be a new video with new blocks, and it's tons and tons of applique. So let me share some of the details with you. Each new week we're going to do 2 new blocks together. I'm going to walk you through this first video, which might be a little bit longer than the rest of the videos. I'm going to show you sort of the layout of these videos. I'm going to walk you through making a block 1 together. We'll make block 2, and then each week I'm going to bring you along as I make my blocks as a suggestion and inspiration for you to make your blocks along with me. I think I want to keep the videos a little bit shorter so we can just get right to having fun and creating this quilt together. If you want to play along in this fall mystery quilt, the links will be in the description box below. There'll be a link for this week's blocks. There'll be a link to my Etsy shop so that you can check out other listings there as well. And there will also be a link in the description box for the full playlist for this series. You can save the playlist. All of your videos for this quilt will be in one easy place for you to find. Plus, there's 2 additional videos. One was my first YouTube live video, and then the other video was one that I just put up day before yesterday that talks about all of my fabric choices for this quilt. The YouTube live video has lots of pertinent information that you might find useful for this quilt. And just in case this is your first time joining me, I would love it if you subscribe and follow along. Click the like button and make sure to hit the bell notification so that you get notified when new videos are uploaded and you can come check out all of the fun. Also, don't forget to share this video with your friends who you think might have fun playing along in this fall mystery quilt with us. Now, let's go ahead and get started with today's 2 blocks. Let's jump right in and take a look at what all week number 1 has to offer. So when you purchase your listing, you're going to have 5 downloads. The first one is your fabric requirements. If you'd like to print off this 1-page PDF and then have this to gather all of your things, then that is there waiting for you. And if you've already written this list down from previous videos, then you do not need to download this PDF. That is all of your fabric requirements. And this is block number 1. So this is what your patterns will look like. You'll have a first sheet that shows you a detailed colored picture of what our finished block will look like. I've color coded the blocks in the colors that I'm using, but it just sort of gives you a reference point to go by different colors that you can use. You'll also have fabric pieces that make up this block right here in this box and some simple instructions. You'll also get this next page, which is your tracing templates. If you're using freezer paper, if you're using Heat and Bond Light, Wonder Under, any of your fusible products to do your applique, your templates have been mirror imaged, so you're ready to start tracing. So here are the templates for our spoon block. And block number 2 is called Cupcakes, and this is what block number 2 will look like. You'll notice that this scarlet fabric, that is our sashing. We're going to be adding the sashing as we make each block. Isn't that super cute? So again, your block requirements for your fabrics. This tells you the size and dimensions of your background, how many sashing pieces you need and the size of those. And then of course your applique fabrics, you'll use scraps larger than your applique templates. So let's go ahead and take a look at these applique templates. Right there, it's going to tell you you need 6 of each one of these 2 pieces. Now, you have these 2 separate PDFs that you can download, and then there are 2 SVG files this week. One is for the spoon block, and the second one is for the cupcakes. If you're using a cutting machine to do your applique with, then you can go ahead and download those SVGs. And if you're doing your applique with freezer paper or a Fusible, then you can just leave those SVGs right with Etsy. There's no need to download those files. So we're ready to jump in. We're going to start with block number 1. For our first block together, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I cut out my background pieces, and I will use this method for each one of the 16 blocks that we are cutting for this quilt. I'm cutting my blocks from yardage, so I'm going to go ahead and straighten up this raw edge, and then I'm going to measure over the smallest amount of my block to reduce the amount that I'm cutting from my yardage. And I'm going to cut my block in one direction and then cut my block the other direction. Each one of the block measurements is written right on the first page of our pattern pieces. For my sashing throughout this whole quilt, we'll be using a sashing that is cut at 2.5 inches wide. I'm cutting from yardage. I'm going to clean up this raw edge, and then I'm going to cut one long strip of sashing, and from that we'll trim the sashing strip to the sizes that we need for each block. You'll end up cutting lots and lots of strips of sashing. Now the measurements for the length of sashing are on the first page of our pattern. I'm just going to bring you along as I show you a quick way. You can cut it precisely to the size of your block, but I'm just going to eyeball it and cut it a little bit longer in one direction, and then I'll cut out my second piece, making sure I give myself enough sashing to accommodate the other sashing piece, like you see me doing right here. There is an order in which we'll sew this sashing onto our block, so make sure to follow the written instructions for each one. Once we have our pieces cut out for our block, we're ready to go ahead and trace our template pieces. For this block, I'm going to use Heat and Bond Light, and I'm going to use my light pad and simply trace my pattern pieces that are already mirror imaged right onto my Heat and Bond Light. I've already done my cupcake pieces too. You'll see right up here in the corner. Once you have your pieces traced, you can separate them and go to your pressing board. Make sure to press your Heat and Bond Light templates to the back side of your fabric. Follow the pressing directions for whichever fusible you're using. You can cut out your pieces, and then we're ready to fuse them onto our backgrounds. So we're creating block number 1 together. Here's my spoon applique pieces. I'm just going to give this block a finger press right in the center so I can line up my pieces. And I'm just really eyeballing this to find the location of my spoon. I'm going to layer the handle of my spoon right over top of the yellow applique piece and fuse that into place. Now we're ready to bring this to the sewing machine, and we'll do some satin stitches on this particular block. Now I've already set up my machine for the settings for my satin stitch. I'm going to place a piece of lightweight tearaway stabilizer underneath, and we'll begin doing the satin stitch. And I'll bring you along as I do the satin stitch for the spoon block. Now if you've watched many of my applique videos, then you know I love using a lightweight tearaway stabilizer underneath of my applique work. It keeps your stitches nice and pretty. It keeps the tension on your thread correct. It keeps your background from puckering. There's all different kinds of stabilizer you can use. You could use coffee filters. You could use lightweight newsprint. Just working my way around the spoon with the yellow thread. And once I get to the base of the handle, I'll rethread my machine with some brown thread, and we'll finish up the handle. I'll bring you in a little bit closer so you can see my satin stitch a little bit better. Just going all the way around my handle. I'll do the outside first. If you are completely new to applique and doing raw edge applique with a satin stitch, make sure to check out some of my other videos. I have a video about satin stitch tips, several videos about doing satin stitch with your applique work. If this is something new for you, I hope you do not get intimidated. Go watch up some videos and come back and make your block number 1. Throughout this quilt, I plan on doing all kinds of different stitches to secure my applique down. And so for this block number 1, I've chosen the satin stitch. Going right over top of that yellow thread and coming back to where we started. Now I'll jump over to the little hole in the handle and finish my satin stitch. Now that we are finishing up the applique portion of block number 1, we can move over to the pressing board where I've already prepared the background fabric for block number 2 and cut out my little cupcake pieces. We can start fusing them down into their locations. Now you can get really precise with this if you want and measure out equal spaces between all of your cupcakes. I'm just going to eyeball it and have fun with my applique. I will measure the same distance with just 4 little fingers from the bottom of the block with the bottom cupcake, move up to the top, measure 4 fingers down, fuse the top cupcake, and then I'm really just eyeballing the location of each one of the cupcakes in between. Once these are all fused into place, we can move over to the sewing machine, and this time I've put on my free motion foot and I'm going to do some free motion work, leaving a raw edge on my applique. We'll bring up the bobbin thread before we get started. And now I'm simply drawing with my thread all the way around the icing portion of my cupcakes. I like to do 2 or 3 passes just to make the line of thread a little bit bolder and more noticeable. This will leave a raw edge with our fabric, which I think is adorable. Now with your applique pieces, you can do any kind of stitch that you would like to do to secure down your pieces. You could do them all with a satin stitch. You could do a zigzag stitch. You could choose from any of the decorative stitches on your machine if you would like to do that. I'm just going to play around with all of these different blocks that we're making together and do different kinds of stitches and really just have fun creating this quilt with you. doing a free motion stitch is really just like drawing right on top of your fabric. You could do little loops, you could do zigzags, you could do one single line of stitching versus going 2 or 3 times like I'm doing. You could draw little sprinkles onto your icing with different colors of thread. And once I'm done with one section, I'm just skipping down and starting on the next section. And I'll do that for each one of the cupcakes all the way from the top to the bottom. Once I'm done with this blue thread and the icing portion of my cupcakes, I will rethread my machine with some brown thread, and I will cut all of the jump stitches on the front and back before I start stitching with my brown. Now we can start stitching with the brown thread. For this block, I am using the, Sulky embroidery thread. So it has a nice little pretty sheen to the stitches. I like having fun and using all different kinds of thread, all different colors with my applique. For the bottom portion, I'm only going around the base of my cupcake twice and then jumping to the next section. I think this stitch gives a really playful and whimsical look to the applique. I think it's going to look adorable in this quilt. Now that we're finishing up the applique for block number 2, we can start adding the sashing for our blocks. Now that we have our applique all stitched down, we're ready to add our 2 pieces of sashing for block number 1. We're first going to start by adding the bottom piece. So this will go right side down, right on the bottom of the block. You will sew that seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Press that open and we'll be right back. Now that we've added this sashing, I've pressed it open, we're ready to trim and square off the sashing ends. We're just going to line everything up with the lines on our mat and trim off this extra bit of sashing. Flip it around, we'll trim off this side. Make sure everything's nice and squared up. Just like that. So we have our bottom sashing added, and now we can add the next piece of sashing right to the right side. So we'll flip the pretty side down, line up those raw edges, and sew again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from top to bottom. Press that open and we'll be right back. I just pressed the right side sashing and we can trim up these 2 ends. And just like that, we have completed block number 1. Now we'll add the sashing to block number 2. For the sashing for block number 2, we have 2 pieces that are a little bit longer than our block piece. We're going to add to the left and right sides, just like this. And we're going to sew both of those pieces with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the top to the bottom. And then we're going to press those open and then trim them up. Now here's my cupcake block, and we're ready to go. Whoops, I'm sorry. We're ready to go ahead and trim away all of the extra bits of sashing off the ends of these. I'm going to line up that raw edge to align on my mat and trim away that sashing. Just like that. We'll flip it over and do the same thing. I love these colors together. I would have never thought about adding the pops of teal with these colors, but I think it's fantastic. And there we go. There is our finished block number 2. I think the sketched look with the applique is adorable. So I'll take a photograph and we'll take a really good look at blocks 1 and 2. So we've only created the first 2 blocks of this quilt, and I am already in love. I love these colors. If you want to see how I selected the colors for this quilt, remember to check out the playlist. It's going to have the fabrics that I chose for this quilt, a little video you can check out. Maybe you're wondering how to choose colors for your quilt. You might find that video helpful. So let's take a look at these 2 blocks. Here's block 1. And there is the spoon block. And then let's bring over block number 2. And this is our cupcakes block. So I really just can't wait to start seeing your blocks as you get them done. If you do Facebook and you're on the Creative Crew group, there's a link below if you want to join. I would love to see your blocks. You can post them and keep me updated. Keep us all updated on the progress of this quilt. And if you don't do Facebook, I would still love to see your pictures. Contact me through Etsy. You could send me a picture that way. And also my email is down in the description box as well. I would love to see what you're working on, what you've got done, and cheer you on as we create this quilt together. So I cannot wait to see you next Friday. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to jump down to the comments section below, and I'll try to be quick and timely in getting back with you and helping if I can. And as always, I hope you have a fun, fantastic week creating. Cannot wait to see you next week. Bye, everybody.